I'm Wild Acai, and this is going to be my panel on what I do for building fursuits.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Acai and my panel of advanced fursuit building using technology, or at least that's what I'm calling it. As you probably all know, I own Waggery Costumes, and we are do a lot of parts and definitely been picking up doing a lot more full suits. And I've definitely kind of gotten known for doing means of using a lot more technology in building my suits. And let me just pull up something cute to look at. So this is a suit we recently completed, and just give you an example of essentially where all we have different technology in here. Basically, the entire head is sculpted in the computer. The eyes are all, every piece that goes in here, the eyes, the teeth, all that's done. The entire body, I do bodies by measurements. And from that, I use the software to go ahead and generate the actual patterns on this. Let me reiterate here too real quickly that the software doesn't do this for me. It doesn't, I click things and it just patterns the body out. It takes a real understanding of patterning. It takes real understanding of what you're actually doing to do these things. The software and these programs are nothing more than a tool that basically gives me the means to do it. I'll be quick to say I never really did the skills of doing this stuff the old school way, so this is the way I figured out, which is using software. But anyways, let me kind of dive into it here. So another thing I want to point out here too is that with what I'm going to cover here today, this is not the exacts as to how to do this. This is kind of the overview of my method. I'll go into some detail on it, but realistically, the software I use is not the only solution. I tend to use a lot more of the paid industrial commercial software rather than the free choices, simply because I want better support. I want something that's going to do the job. And usually the learning curve is a little less with that. I mean, you're paying for it one way or another. You're either paying for it up front in more money for the program, or you're paying for it in the end in your time investing in trying to figure it out. So, and by that, I basically mean for example, there's free sources for 3D software, and there's a lot of options available, but usually a lot of times with those, you're paying a penalty in that the resources aren't there for how to learn it. Whereas with, I particularly use Modo for doing a lot of my 3D work, and there's tons of resources on the web for that. So anyways, let's just go ahead and get into it. So for starters, as I mentioned, I do everything by measurements on my bodies, and I'm going to start there. So what I do is I have a document that I use, and it's basically, it kind of covers a lot of the basic measurements. Let me pull that up here so we can take a look at that and sound intelligent. All right, so this is my measurements form. So basically, and zoom out on here so we can kind of see. And what I do is I effectively I have the illustrations on here I hope people read, but realistically the pictures, pictures 1,000 words. And essentially what this boils down to is I'll just flip through this. So you've got the chest, the waist, basically what I call the lower waist, and then essentially around your belly button, if you will. This one I just get more for informational purposes. And some of these, to be honest, I don't actually use all these measurements that are in here. Some of them are nothing more than checks to see hey, this number isn't looking right compared to what I'm seeing here. And it's ways for me just to kind of piece together if somebody didn't measure something correctly. And then of course too, depending upon what it is. I mean, if I'm doing a digigrade suit, I really don't care about the calf because that's going to get blown out. However, even in a digigrade suit, I'm going to need to know this measurement for what I'm going to do on the inside liner. So, but you can see it's pretty standard measurements that we're doing here. Some of these are a little different than what you'd normally get from most clothing because again, a fursuit is typically, think of it as a giant onesie. So you have to make sure that everything is matching in there. But this just gives you kind of an idea of essentially the measurements that I'm actually collecting and getting. And then of course at the very end, I get I get this because most suits we're doing the foot paws on, so I need their shoe size, I want the overall height, and I need the weight. And the weight's more for me just to get a better understanding because again, if you have somebody if they're saying they've got a 32-inch waist, yet they're 260 pounds, yeah, that ain't right. I'm sorry. So I can also check things and know by looking at the weight. Lastly, I also request these particular poses. of the person. And the reason is that, for example, so you have like a 48-inch chest measurement. Well, you can either have a really large chest where you've got a lot of, you've got a really built front chest for muscles, or it could even be a female too. That's the other part too, is you have to consider both ends of that. Or there's other people that just have a really hunched over back. By getting that photo of the person, you really get a good perspective of how their body is built. And that tells you, again, pictures 1,000 words. So from there, I basically take this information and I go over to a program called Make Human. And Make Human is actually a free program. And what I'm doing is basically I just need a mesh, because I'm going to take that mesh and I'm going to bring it into Modo and I'm going to modify it further. So I needed a program to generate the mesh for me on demand very cleanly. So this software does it really nicely. And effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to set the genders, so you can either be female or male. Age really doesn't matter unless you're, we're not making stuff for babies, and we're not, not too many people are terribly old that are in it, except for me. But anyways, I'm 47. So anyways, you can go through here and you can set it. And basically what you're doing a lot of times, you just look at the picture of the person and you can be able to see what their build is, and you can be able to adjust it accordingly. So if somebody's like really heavy, you can dial back the muscle and you can dial up the weight and be able to generate, just even without looking at measurements, you can kind of get it in the neighborhood. But let's just do something a little more average of a person. And then of course the height. This down here tells you what your height is down here at the bottom. Unfortunately, it's not a real great way of being able to say, and weight, for example, too. It doesn't ask pounds or anything else like that, so you're just purely going through image. But essentially, you're going to adjust the weight. And usually what I do is I overcompensate on things. It's always better to be bigger than smaller. Then I'm going to go over here to measure. And in measure, I'm going to go through these different categories here and set them. Some of them don't really matter too much unless, again, looking at the picture, if somebody's got a really thick neck, okay, I'll pay attention. Otherwise, I'm not even really that worried about it. But like the torso, of course, these are all very important ones. And there's only certain measurements I'm going to actually do in here. I don't use this program to do everything. Again, I'm just basically, I am setting these to the actual numbers that the customer is. And again, just, if they say they're 35 and a half, I'm not going to get it right at 30 and a half. I'll just push it a little bit up above. Again, it's better to be bigger than smaller. So I go through and get these measurements done. I do the upper arm. I'll go ahead and adjust that. And again, what I'm doing is just really circumferences right now. I'm not doing the lengths. And the reason I've found is basically the way that they do this for really being able to measure this is actually kind of hard to translate normal measurements into what this program does. So for example, I'm trying to say, hey, how long is their torso? How long are their arms? Well, the problem is these measurements are kind of nebulous lengths for where that point is and where that point is. So, and it's hard to get that from a measurement. So those are things that I actually prefer to do in Modo. So anyways, once I've got this person figured out and I've got everything done to pretty much what it is, I'll go ahead and export it. And let's see here. Let's just throw it on the desktop here. I'm going to call it Mr. All right, and we're going to, I got to make this be an object. We're going to make this be a meter, and we're going to export. So oh, come on, Mr. All right, next we're going to pull up Modo, and you'll see whatever is last working on. A dog. Fancy that. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to get this down so you can see everything in the window, which I probably should have done earlier, but I'm not that prepared. It's my first time ever doing any kind of screen capture thing, so this is all new for me too. All right, so pull this up so you don't see those ears peeking on there. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up that file that we just did. And so I'm going to drag good old Mr. Here into Modo. And so by doing this, it's going to ask me, and let's do that. All right, so now we've got our guy. But the thing that's important to look at here is that we have our mesh. And basically, that's what that program is building, is basically an appropriately done mesh. Now, there's two flavors of editing 3D things. There are mesh type of geometry like this here, and there's another system called voxels. Voxels are like pixels. It's like a three-dimensional pixel. So I prefer to work in the mesh environment, and the reason is it gives you the means of being able to do things like this, where I can say, hey, I just want to chop off this person's hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to select particular geometry. So I'm just going in and say, okay, I'm going to select this around, oops, a little overzealous there, the neck. I'm going to go down here to the feet. I'm going to chop this off, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to split it. And what that did is just isolated this geometry, the hand, and the head. I'm going to delete those things, and I get some eyeballs floating on here and get rid of. So now I want to get rid of the stuff on the other side. So I'm just going to go in the center here. And I'm going to make sure that this is actually zeroed out. So we're going to zero this and pull this over here so you can see what I'm doing. So now I can use a fun little command they have in here called symmetrize. And I click on that, and all of a sudden both sides are exactly equal. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these measurements. I'm going to do some modification of the geometry. I go ahead and I select, oops, certain geometry that is just, it's not needed. So I'll delete some of that stuff. I'm going to go ahead and subdivide it here just to get it to be a little smoother looking. We'll do the same thing on the legs here. We're just going to get rid of some stuff that we don't need. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a little bit of pre-posing of this guy, because yes, we have all bent arms, but generally we don't have our arms bent that much, and you don't want to have the suit have huge bent arms. So I'm just going to pull this up here a little bit, do a little bit of a soft selection so I can kind of figure out where I want it to be. And I'm just going to rotate his arm out to straighten it out. And we're going to go up here in the front and do the same thing. I'm going to walk this selection on up here a little further, and then, do I know one more? Nope, just that one. And we're going to add some more that we're going to select, because we're going to take this on up the shoulder. I'm just going to taper this up here like so. And go to the front view, and again I'm going to do my soft selection, which that turns it off and then back on. And now I can just say, okay, I want to select just that area there. That's good. I'm going to rotate and raise that arm back up there. What this is doing too, which is kind of good, because notice how it kind of elongated underneath the armpit here. But I wanted to create a little more real estate there so you can reach to there and not feel like you're getting strangled that way. So, because as you reach up on your arm, this is going to pull on the body, and then all of a sudden you're going to get, tightness down there. So anyways, I'm going to go through here and do those types of things. But this is where the mesh geometry really shines. So I want to take a look and see, well, how long is this arm? Because again, one of the measurements that we had on there was the measurement that showed our upper arm. Let's find that in here. And so this is a perfect example of where mesh geometry is good. I want to know what this distance is. So if somebody says it's whatever distance, let's go over here to Modo, and I'm just going to take a look at that and see, okay, yeah, it's 28, or basically 29 inches is what that is. Now say they had the arm length was, say, 31 inches. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select there at the bottom, I'm going to soft select, and I'm just going to expand the selection up here quite a ways. And now I'm going to, and again, this is where you can see there's a chunk to learn when you're using 3D software. So I'm moving it along the normal, and I moved it, say, down here by like about 1.5 inches. Let's see what that ends up being. So that measurement's, 30.5 inches. So now we roughly accomplished our rough guess what it is. Now this person has a really long arm. But anyways, and we can do the same type of things for the legs. So if typically, for example, on the legs, I'll go ahead and let me just do a symmetrize to get this even, and then I can work in symmetry. So deselect everything, symmetrize, and then we're going to turn on symmetry. And I'm going to loop around here and just walk the selection on up, give it a little bit of a soft selection. Not quite that much, just a little bit. And we're going to go front view, front. And now we're going to rotate. So I'm just going to throw this approximately where that person's joint is. I'm just going to spread their legs out. So now by doing this, what I've done is just like I did in the armpit, I created some real estate down here, because you don't want to split your, do the splits and then tear your suit out. So we want to create a little more real estate in there. Lastly, what I'm going to do is I see some issues here, looking at the cheeks, and I'm going to go ahead and spread these cheeks just a touch. And I'm just going to, do this to smooth that out. And the reason is that this roughly is going to be that person's body dimensions. Now, if somebody has a really oblong shape, things like that, I may come in here and I may actually just like, okay, they're a really chesty person, so I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to bring this back. They could have, let's give them, say they got a lot more in the junk in the trunk. So I can do that. And again, I can also go through and I can look at these and say, okay, what's his dimensions? Okay, 39 inches. And I can make sure that these numbers are matching and, matching and or above, ideally above, what the measurements are they gave us, but not terribly far off. Then once we've got that, the problem is if we pattern this is going to be something so quite literally skin tight that they'll never be able to get it on. So what we have to do is we have to make a little bit of room. So I'm going to go ahead and just push this out, and I'm just going to push it out by my magic secret number is usually about 0.4 as I typed incorrectly. So, and again, it depends upon the size of the person. The bigger the person, the more I push it. So now I've just basically moved it all along its normals, and you can see why I kind of did what I did on his butt. And you can see there, it's a little tight in the cheeks. I'm just going to go ahead and spread that a little in here. So let's go over here and spread that cheek just a touch. Because we don't want to have anything too tight for, you'll find out in the next program we're at. So now I've roughly got this person's body, so to speak, in the neighborhood. So let's just go ahead and export this. And I'm just going to call this Mr. Expanded, because that's what we did, is we expanded him out. And now let's go over here to our third program that we use, which is CLO. CLO basically is the software I use for being able to actually pattern things. Let me just get this down here so it is in the neighborhood where I can see everything. And it helps if I size down the screen first. All right, that's in the neighborhood there. So this software basically lets me take a body, if you will, and I can apply the clothing to it. So like this, oops, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. That's the model. One of these is the actual clothing. You turn on and off. But we'll start off with that. So let's go ahead and just say, let's go here to new, and we're going to remove this avatar that's in here. So I'm just going to delete all avatars, and we're going to bring in the one that we just created. So import object. Some of you might have also heard of this program under a different name. It's actually the same program using two totally different names. The other one it's known as is Marvelous Designer, and I just realized I exported this to the wrong type of file. I need it to be an OBJ. Let's try that. Now you should be happy. Maybe. Where did I put it? Wild dog is being a dork. I did put it in there. Oh, helps if I actually hit the right file. All right, so here is our file. Saved it over the other one, but who cares? So this arranges it in here, and now we have our body. But the important thing, what we're going to do here is that we're actually going to trace off our pattern. Now, what I do, this is great and all, and theoretically, this should be the person's body. But of course, what we can render in the computer just by taking some guesses is never going to be exact. So what I typically do is I will generate from this just a simple pattern, and I generate what I call a cloth body. I sew a body together out of basically cloth. And so what it is essentially, I use muslin, which is it's bedsheet material is really what it is. But the neat thing about it is that it simply does not, it doesn't stretch. And that's the important part of this, is having something that does not stretch. And by that, then I can, when the customer wears it, I can see essentially things that are tight or things that are not. So let me just open up a picture here. Hopefully this person's okay with me showing their picture. So this is what we end up generating. We basically end up creating a body, and the person puts it on. And you can see areas of where it's tight. You can see the tight wrinkles here, the tight wrinkles. You can see where it's loose. So we can be able to look at this, how this person's fitting in here, and be able to make adjustments. Like this is like stretched perfectly tight on there, almost probably a little bit much. This is loose. I can see what his arm lengths are. I can see what the leg lengths are. So I'm able to go ahead and, well, you're not able to see it. Let me go ahead and change this. Close out Mr. Colley here. Let's reduce that there. There you go. So you can be able to see essentially things that are whatever is if there's anything adjustments. So like this case here, yeah, I need to lengthen his arms. And of course, the problem is when people measure themselves. Ideally, you'd love to have specific start end points, but where somebody puts that tape up here against their neck, or if they go down to their actual collar, and theoretically you're supposed to get onto their ankle or their wrist, but essentially they may not always go there. So this is just a fantastic way to verify everything and see how that's actually fitting. So that's what we're going to create here. So it's nothing more than just we're going to draw the pattern on. So I start with essentially putting a line up the middle of the suit here, and we're going to just connect this at the top, and then I'm going to put a line up the back side here. We're going to connect that at the top. And then we're going to draw out the sleeves. Because again, we're just creating a very rudimentary body here is all we're doing. As to how we're doing this. So again, I'm just going to do the sleeve. I'll run it down here. So incidentally, between CLO and Modo, there's a fantastic online resource for learning a lot of this, and it's actually a YouTube channel called Pixel Fondue. And Pixel Fondue has a ton of just little teeny excerpts. They're like, I think it was William Vaughn that does most of them. And he always does Vaughn in 30 seconds or Vaughn in 60 seconds. And really, that's exactly what it is. And in his little excerpts, he will go through using various tools very rapidly. And it's almost like, Casey, you're like, whoa, slow down. I need to figure this out. But it basically, they teach you all of these things. And whoops, I did not get this line correct. Let's try this one again. So that ain't really, I'm just going super fast here too. Normally I'm a little more detailed than this, but I'm trying to, you'd be bored as stiff if I was to actually do this at the speed that I normally would do this at. So, and sometimes in this software, I'll be very quick to admit, it's made in, I want to say like India or South Korea or something like that. It does a fantastic job. The online documentation is absolutely horrific. The help videos are like an absolute laughing stock. You go into any of the tools in here and it has a little pop-up and you click on video and it's a joke. They'll basically show you the video. And so to use this tool, you click on the button. I know how to click on the button. What does the tool do? And that's what they don't show you. So it's just kind of a joke as to what their manuals are. So anyways, I'm just going through and I'm basically, I've kind of standardized a pattern for what I'm going to do on things. But again, this is not necessary for the suit, but just basically to create a onesie pattern. If I need to, I can grab points and you can move them around. Oops. So, and what this is going to do is it's going to generate this, where it allows me to go ahead and select sections here and do it. Now I just see I got something going on here because that should be not one piece. So let's take a look at this here. Something is, I didn't connect that all the way to that line. Let's zoom in here. See if that fixed it. There we go. We got two separate pieces here. So we want the butt cheek, we got the side. I got to do the legs. I'm not done yet. So we're going to just divide this across here so I don't have too giant of a piece. And then I'm going to run a piece that goes down as a leg here. Okay, let's take a look at that. That's good. And because I have lots of experience with this program, the one time it likes to crash is right here. So Mr. is going to get saved before I try flattening. So we're going to go over and flatten this. And what we're going to do is just select, I'm going to select everything for that matter and deselect that. Oh, I got some here. I'm not getting a leg. What's going on with the leg? So again, if there's something that it's not going to be able to do, it's generally going to show you there's a problem. And the other thing is too, sometimes you'll have issues with the geometry where you'll have to go back into the 3D program and edit that. And so like this one here, there's something goofy here. So I'm going to just try deleting that line. And see, it's frustrating. Like I deleted one line, it took out a whole bunch of other geometry that I didn't want to lose. So, but I'm just going to redraw it in here because there's something going goofy there. So we're just going to bring this on up here. And like I said, I'm going way sloppy compared to what I would normally do, but this is just to give you the idea of what the process is. All right, so now I need to put in this connection here. So we're going to draw a line from here on up his side. We'll connect it to this one. And then let's take a look here. We need to do our line up the center. So I'm just going to try connecting it in there. And it's one of those things that ideally, yes, you'd say, hey, this should work. And it probably absolutely should, but there could be, so many things like issues with the geometry, stuff like that, that's going to prevent it from working. So now we do this. Now let's, something's still going goofy here. So rather than me spend the time trying to investigate that here, I'm just going to flatten out what I've got here. And then, so you can see and you'll get the idea. So by selecting these, I can hit the return and it will go ahead and flatten these. Now, if the lines you're drawing are too far out there, it may not flatten. And you can see here where it kind of is tight, and that would actually be tight in Suit, which is accurate. So, but now it's showing me these pieces here. And what I can do is I can select these pieces, which is just a portion of the body, and I'm going to symmetrically pattern these. And then I'm going to tell it to do some sewing. So I'm going to sew the chest together. I put a bunch of extra dots in there trying to see if I can figure out where the bug was. And sew together the back. And now we need to actually move it over on him so it's not like clear out floating out here in space. So we're going to select all these dudes. Bring that in. Now I'm going to let it render it. So hit the space bar, it does a quick render, and it's just going to sew it together and stretch it over the person. So now you can kind of see what it's doing. Oops, I forgot to do his butt. Got to sew the butt cheeks. There we go. So now it's roughly, minus the legs, it's roughly together here. So what I do from this is I export this and print it, and then we'll go ahead and use that as the pattern to generate the cloth body. And that's basically the process I do largely for doing my bodies. Now, if I was doing a planet grade body on this, I could start either at, we could basically go over here and start adding in colors and different things. So I could have, say I'm going to have like a red fur that's going to be in here. And I can start dragging fur colors to different sections and be able to do that. But invariably what ends up happening is you have other designs that go in there. And this allows you the means of being able to say, hey, we're going to put a big old diamond on his belly right here. And so I'm going to put that in there. Come on, let go. Let go. And now we can go ahead and I can take this and I can say, hey, let's convert this to an internal shape. And now in this internal shape, I can go ahead and let's add another third color in here. Let's make him something really, make him be the Christmas. Now, actually, I need to split this apart. So I put the line on here, and it's got an internal line. But next, what I need to do is grab this line, and I need to say cut and sew. And it's going to split that apart. So now it's a separate piece. Now I can drag that in there, drag this in on the other side. And now I've got that sub-pattern. So basically, this is what I call sub-patterning. And you can do that all over around the body to go ahead and create your design. Now, the reality is the next step of this is you get the photos back from the customer and you see whatever you need to adjust. And usually in that case, that's when I go back over here to Modo and I'll make my adjustments on it. That like, oh, it's really tight in the belly here. So what I'm going to do in that case is I'm going to move this out and give them some more space. So and what this is going to do by me changing the model, I'm adjusting essentially the next time I trace this out, it's just going to create more real estate there. The next thing is, say it is a digigrade suit, and on digigrade suits you're going to have shape. Okay, so we can do that. So what I can do is I can say, okay, well, let's give him some knee. We're going to grow this out here, and we're going to not make him look weird. So we're going to grow out the shape, and we're going to create this, and then we're going to bring this on up here, and we're going to bring out his back legs, and let's give him really a big pronounced thing back there, make him look really goofy. And then let's do this. And and you can also, there's other sculpting tools in here. I like Modo simply because it has a lot of really good tool sets built in, whereas some other software solutions, one program may not do it all, so then you're dragging that geometry through umpteen different programs. And I just dislike that. I wanted to be able to have one program I can get in, one program I can learn, and just go to town. This is some really, really ugly digigrade I'm doing here. But you get the idea. And say we want to give them a butt. Well, let's just go ahead and expand this out. Now we can give them a little more of a booty, and we can not zoom in that way, Claire. And then we go over here and say we want to give him a chest. He wants some chest, and say he wants some upper arm padding. So we can go through and we can sculpt all of that out and be able to create that, which is ideal. So you can use the tools in here to do this. And you kind of get the idea already. So I've created the shape. I'm going to export this, and then I'll bring this new object back into CLO, and I'll draw it off again just to go ahead. And this time you draw it off more based upon the pattern design you're going to have of the suit, and you're going to draw it off based upon the needs. Because again, the challenge here with patterning is you're taking a three-dimensional surface and you're creating two-dimensional pieces of that surface. So it's just kind of like the best example of trying to wrap a piece of paper around a tennis ball. It ain't going to be pretty. The only way you do it is by cutting it into pieces. And again, you look at a ball, how many different means can you take of making a ball round from a flat object? Think of soccer balls, think of baseballs, think of tennis balls. You see how those, the soccer ball has the different pieces that go in there, what a tennis ball is and how its pieces are put together. So there's multiple ways of skinning that cat, quite literally, to go ahead and create the object of taking something flat and making it round, or vice versa. So yeah, that's essentially a large part of this. And that really kind of covers, the basics, the 100-foot view of giving you some detail of what I'm doing on the bodies. Okay, now I'm going to talk about heads a bit here as to how I go about doing my heads. Again, I do all of it in Modo. And heads, there's a lot more to a head than meets the eye. Yes, you're creating the overall shape, but the thing you have to understand, and really what you should do, is look at all of the other details that go into it. You're not just doing the overall shape, but you're needing to consider what is the fur thickness going to do? How are you doing the eyes? How are you doing the mouth? How are you doing the teeth? How are you doing the nose? So all of these factors need to come into place. And let me just break down a few things that I'm doing here. So this is a maned wolf here that I've created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delve into just a few little things in here. So for example, yes, I can put fur, and I've got some areas on here where I have fur rendered. And fur is nice, but sometimes it's hard to see the shape. So what I typically do is, and this is all just in low-res preview, I can go in here and create high-res renders if I want, but those just take a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to turn off some of this fur. So I'm just kind of break out the different pieces that are in this. What I do a lot of times though for the faces to try and see what I'm doing is I just use a displacement. A displacement basically, because again, what is fur? If fur is a thickness. And so you can measure the fur and how much you're shaving it down and seeing what kind of thickness you're adding. So I just put a displacement on here. It's doing nothing more than just moving that geometry out by their normals to create that thickness of the fur and simulate it. So you can see essentially if I look at it without the fur, it looks kind of weird. But once you add that thickness of the fur, it really brings it to life. So a lot of what you're sculpting too is basically trying to get that underlying shape to generate what you want after it's furred. And the neat thing about this is that I can essentially leave this displacement on and be able to move the geometry around and create that look to find out what is it I'm wanting to do and be able to create that in desire that I'm after. So like this, I can just take the head here and what is it doing? It's doing weird things. But you can basically grab your geometry and move it around. Is what you can do. I have no idea what it's doing, but anyways, I won't investigate that right now. I'm just going to go over the methods here. So let's turn off the displacement and let's just take a look at the individual parts. So I'm going to turn off my head. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn off the model. I'm going to turn off my ears, and I'm going to turn off my teeth, and I'm going to turn off my eyes. So let's just start off with, I start with basically a Cfx head, and this is just a head model that I morphed out, I changed, I added space. Basically I don't like masks right on my face. You want to have real estate in there for movement and just so it's not like smushing on your face. So I took basically a standard Cfx head and I 3D scanned it and I modified it to do that. Then the next step is basically the head. So I create the head, and the head has a certain geometry to it. Again, I use a mesh method, and the mesh is really important because I'm wanting to have edge flow. Let me turn off some of this shading here so you can see the mesh a little better. And you'll see that there's, what's called the edge flow is very important. And why it is important is that I can be able to select particular areas and I can go in here and change those areas. So if I wanted to, I can say, hey, let's go ahead and let's bring his nose in here a little bit. I can select this and I can select this loop, and now I can go over here and I can simply size this down and see how it's pulling that in. It's pulling it in all the way around. And that's very powerful to have that. Some of these other things you see here, like this green business that's going on, these are what I call travelers, and it's nothing more than the nose is going to have a thickness. This is your base of your foam, and essentially from that you're going to have the fur coming up. You want the end point of that shaved fur to match where the nose is. You don't want to have your fur going above and coming out. You want to have that match. So I will oftentimes create little distances there. The same thing around on the lips here that goes in there. I also sculpt out the mouths entirely too, and we actually print molds for all of those things too. So when we pour it, the end result is an actual head that is fully formed. So this gives you an idea. But the next thing you have in here is, which of course is important, is the eyes. So my eyes are, I'm going to turn off the head here so you can be able to see what's going on. Oops, wrong thing. Go over here, and let's turn this off so we can stare at these a little better. So these are eye units that I've created, and basically they're panels that actually are an eyeball. They have what they've got in there. They're shaped like they've got this paddle design on there to keep the eyes from rotating around in the head, whether they spin up, down, or side, rotational, whatever it is. And then I just draw on here using the geometry to kind of create the shape of the eye. Sometimes I may actually just manually draw it too. Depends upon what I'm doing, what the character is. What this does is basically, this is something that I can now 3D print. Now, it goes through much more than that. I will actually put in rings that go around on here to create the trim. I chop out where the center part of the eye is. There's a lot more details that go on here, but this is the basic of what I'm doing. So that's another detail you have. Okay, and then lastly, you've got more details, which are going to be like the teeth, for example. So I may actually, I'll bring in some teeth that I've made, and I'll move them around and get them placed where I want them, so I can kind of get the look to be how I'm wanting that to be. So, and this gives me kind of the overall look of what I'm after. So by the time you bring all these things together, and of course there's a lot more details here that I could cover, but realistically I'm just trying to give, again, the overall overview of what this is. Ears are another thing. That's what he's missing. And I've got different ears I've made for different characters I kind of start from to go ahead and play with. So I'll create ears, and I can move them around and morph them however I want to be. But then once I've got all of those things where I want them to be, then we're going to create the molds, because I don't print the positives. I actually print a negative. And the neat thing about this is basically, I'm going to open up the actual mold prep file. I'm not going to go through all the details as to how I got there. But what we're going to do is we are going to find that person's name. There we are. Mold prep. Where is it? There should be a file. Here we go. Head mold prep. And basically what this is doing is this allows me to, I split off in here all the different things that I'm doing. So we have, let's just get rid of some of the stuff that's open and on here. And so like these are the ears. That was the ears that you saw. So I'm splitting out the ears and creating the cavity that's going to be, and this gets split apart into creating the molds. I may go over here and I create, what is this? There's nothing visible in here. Oh, it's thinking about it. And some of the stuff takes some pretty heavy math. It's actually pretty surprising what it takes to do some of these things. So apparently this is the actual in mold. So what I was doing is I take geometry and I shrink it down over the head, and then I subtract the head out of that. And by doing that, basically, I'm building this flat part here is essentially the build surface for the printer. And then the actual head gets subtracted out of this. And that's what I use to print with. Now, as you can see, there's some other geometry that's weird in here. And of course, the process is never perfect. So it does create some errors and some weird things you have to go in there and just manually clean up. Other things I'll be creating is going to be essentially like this is the combined head. So this is taking that Cfx head and I combine it with the geometry to create, this is what I'm subtracting out of the other. Other things that I create are like the mouth ball, for example. The mouth ball is the piece that goes inside, to form the inside of the mouth. So those are all elements that go together. And then what I do is I basically print out these molds, and I assemble those molds and pour foam in. But you can use this software to do all of that and even calculate the volumes of those molds and be able to calculate how much foam am I needing to put in there, things like that. So this is just wanted to, like I was saying, give you kind of the overall 100-foot view of what I'm doing, and some details here and there, but just give you some tools to, if you wanted to start investigating this and going about it, just to kind of share how I'm doing about it. And again, what I'm doing is just my method. There's numerous different ways of doing this, and the end result, what you create, is really fun, and it's just that's the really neat thing about this is basically every project you do is going to be different, and every project that you create is going to have different nuances and different looks, and that's what I find is just so fun, is basically creating the end result in the end, and the what you're doing with it. That's what I find is just so much fun. So anyways, I hope this helps and gives you an idea of what I'm doing and how I'm going about it, and can have some fun creating some stuff on your own. So thank you very much.